It's a battle to the death for Earl Sigurd the Mighty, crossing swords with his mortal enemy, Melbrigte Tusk, one of the most ferocious warriors in the land, his infamous long teeth protruding from his yelling mouth. They're in the middle of a brutal battle, surrounded by corpses, but Sigurd won't give up. His whole life has been leading to this moment. He tightens his grip around his sword and swings true, cleaving Tusk's wretched head from his shoulders. The head tumbles to the ground, and Sigurd roars in victory. He did it! He won! His power over the land is now secure. All that's left is to pick up his trophy and head back to his homeland, to drink and to feast and be hailed for his conquest. Number 15. Kostas Mitsotakis, the biggest loser. The lottery. In case nobody's ever told you, your odds of winning are almost inconceivably low. Some places the odds of winning the Powerball jackpot are 1 in 292.2 million. And even if you do win, that doesn't necessarily mean you're lucky. There have been more cases than you can count on your hands where winning the lottery has been a life-ruining experience for some of its biggest winners. In 1988, a man who won the Pennsylvania lottery was sued by his ex-girlfriend and was almost murdered when his jealous brother hired a hitman to kill him. Less than a decade later, in 1997, a man won $31 million in the Texas lottery, which kicked off a series of financial misfortunes and family issues that resulted in his death. His last words to his financial advisors were, "Winning the lottery is the worst thing that ever happened to me." But sometimes the most devastating thing of all isn't the toxic win, it's the near miss. Cut to the rural Spanish village of Sodeto in 2011, a place that was hit hard by the global recession of the late 2000s. Financial mobility isn't seen as attainable in a place like this, except for one unlikely dream: El Gordo, the big one, a Spanish big money Christmas lottery, paying out over $500 million. Every Christmas, the local Housewives Association of Sodeto travels door to door, selling El Gordo tickets to the 75 different families living in the community. And against all odds, 2011 was Sodeto's lucky year. They won the lottery, and everyone in town had a payout ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions of euros each, all except for literally one person, Kostas Mitsotakis, a local filmmaker who didn't want to buy a lottery ticket that year. And because his house was a little off the beaten track, the Housewives Association did not come a-knockin'. Overnight, he became the poorest guy in town. To Kostas' credit, he'd taken the whole thing in stride and made a documentary about the whole experience. Despite the tremendous bad luck of the situation, Kostas still made lemonade out of lemons, so he'll be staying at the top of the list. Our next entry's cloud did not have such an easy silver lining. Number 14. Melanie Martinez, the Hurricane Magnet. Not to be confused with the singer of the same name, Melanie Martinez is an American homemaker whose homes keep getting unmade by hurricanes, leading to multiple outlets dubbing her the unluckiest woman in America. So what exactly happened to Melanie and her series of unfortunate home-destroying events? The Louisiana school bus driver's first close encounter of the windy kind took place all the way back in 1965, when Hurricane Betsy swept in from the Gulf of Mexico and swept away Melanie's childhood home with it. There would be a period of calm after that. Oh no, why do we hear boss music? That must be Hurricane Juan in 1985, once again here to huff puff and blow Melanie's house down. But her tribulations were far from over at this point. In 1998, Hurricane George would strike Louisiana, with Melanie's home being amongst the extensive damage toll. And in 2005, Hurricane Katrina, one of the most devastating hurricanes in American history, once again rendered poor Melanie homeless. This is the sad outcome of living in the Louisiana floodplain. But after Katrina, it seemed like Melanie's luck was about to change for the better. Her latest home in Braithwaite, Louisiana was the subject of an episode of the home makeover reality show, Hideous Homes. That name is the kind of class you can expect from reality shows. But they did at least spend $20,000 renovating the house, and Melanie was incredibly pleased with the work they did, until Hurricane Isaac came in and destroyed it all. 5 storms, 5 houses, cementing Melanie Martinez's place in our list of history's unluckiest people. But as much as it might seem personal, hurricanes are mass destruction events destroying everything in their wake. It's not like they could have specifically targeted Melanie, though when it comes to our next entry on the list, that's a lot harder to argue. Number 13. Anne Hodges, a victim of the cosmos. Sometimes it just feels like God has pointed a finger down at Earth and said, "Hey, screw that particular person." We imagine that's how Anne Hodges felt when she was the first ever person to be struck by a meteor. How on earth did something like this happen, you ask? The details are even stranger and sadder than you'd imagine. Admittedly, there have been some unprovable claims of people being hit by meteors before Anne's fateful afternoon in 1954. Records exist about a friar from Milan who was struck down by a meteor in 1677, killing him, but given the age of the account here, it's impossible to verify if that really ever happened. Then, in 1908, there was the Tunguska event, a catastrophically powerful meteor strike that occurred in the East Siberian taiga. According to some records, the Tunguska event resulted in 3 human fatalities. This brings us to Anne's remarkable incident. On November 30th, 1954, in Sylacauga, Alabama, at around 2 p.m., Anne was having a relaxing afternoon nap on the couch when a meteorite broke into the atmosphere far above, splitting into 3 pieces. One of those pieces fired down toward the Hodges house with pinpoint precision, blasting through the roof and painfully striking Anne on the side. Luckily for Anne, she wasn't severely physically injured after being hit by an object that literally fell from outer space. She even got some fame and notoriety from her bizarre and unlucky claim to fame, but it took a toll on Anne's mental health for the rest of her life. According to her then-husband, Eugene, Anne experienced worsening anxiety and PTSD after the understandably traumatic experience, and he felt like she was socially withdrawn after her incident. Can you really blame her? It seemed like the universe itself was out to get her. But our next entry also had the universe after him, and in this case, sadly, the universe was a lot more persistent. Number 12. Roy Sullivan, the human lightning rod. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. A common phrase, one that probably would have earned you a swift kick in the groin from park ranger and 7-time lightning strike victim Roy Sullivan. All the way back in April 1942, when Sullivan was still a young man, he was struck by lightning while taking refuge from a fire watchtower that wasn't equipped with a proper lightning rod. This would set in motion a trend that would define and ruin his life. The second incident took place in 1969. Despite Sullivan being in a vehicle, which should have acted as a protective Faraday cage, the lightning is believed to have deflected off a tree and into the open window, giving Sullivan a nasty zap that burnt off his eyebrows. The third was in 1970 when Sullivan was in his yard. The lightning bounced off a nearby power transformer and struck his shoulder. The fourth incident, 2 years later in 1972, he was patrolling Shenandoah National Park. In came the lightning to ruin his day and help contribute to his lifelong paranoia whenever he was under an open sky. But Sullivan's ordeal was not over yet. The fifth incident happened a year later in 1973. When Sullivan saw the storm cloud forming, he ran as fast as he could, but not faster than lightning. He was once again struck. The sixth incident was in 1976, where Sullivan once again tried to run away, but he injured his ankle and collapsed where he was struck again, once again burning off his eyebrows. The seventh incident had him struck by lightning while fishing, at which point he was also attacked by a bear, which he had to fight off with a fishing rod. Sadly, those would weigh too heavily on Roy Sullivan, as he would eventually take his own life. Roy Sullivan was followed by misfortune his entire life, but with some unlucky people, it's more about the misfortune their presence seems to place on others. Number 11. Robert Todd Lincoln, the harbinger of dead presidents. You may be wondering about the surname there, and yes, you're correct. We're talking about the son of iconic American President Abraham Lincoln. You already see how a man whose presidential father was shot in the head while attending the theater could be considered unlucky. But Robert Todd Lincoln was in close proximity to 2 other presidents who met sticky ends. In 1881, Lincoln was the Secretary of War for President James Garfield. He was meeting his boss at a station in D.C. when the assassin, Charles J. Guiteau, wielding a revolver, ambushed Garfield and shot him twice from behind at point-blank range. This probably brought back some painful memories for Lincoln, but sadly it wouldn't be the last time that he had a dead president on his conscience. Lincoln was just outside of the Temple of Music in Buffalo when President William McKinley was gunned down by an anarchist assassin, Lon Czolgosz, likely hearing the gunshots go off. With his father and 2 other presidents dead in close proximity to him, it definitely seemed that the poor man was some kind of presidential jinx. Robert Todd Lincoln wasn't ignorant to the strangeness of all these incidents. He was well aware of the seemingly dangerous effect his bad mojo had on the presidents in his life. He allegedly declined when invited to later presidential functions, saying, "No, I'm not going, and they'd better not ask me because there is a certain fatality about presidential functions when I am present." History is full of tragic stories of unlucky people, especially when it comes to the 2 world wars. Number 10. George Lawrence Price, an unfortunate casualty of war. World War I was one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century, marked by millions of deaths, for reasons that ultimately amounted to petty power struggles between various aristocracies across Europe. But one death among those millions felt particularly unfortunate and even tragically pointless. This was the death of Private George Lawrence Price, a Canadian soldier serving under a company of the 28th Battalion of the Canadian Expeditionary Force, which he was conscripted into in 1917, the year before the end of the war. Private Price's company was forced to advance from the south of Mons to Havre Village in France, where their objective was to secure a number of key bridges in the area. Taking off in the early hours of the morning on November 11, 1918, the company was faced with resistance from German fighters embedded in the area. However, the company received important news. An armistice had been declared, and fighting would cease at 11 a.m. Though until then, all bets were still off. Price and a fellow soldier began searching through houses bordering on the Canal du Centre, fearing that their positions would be exposed to the German occupiers. They encountered Germans setting up machine gun positions in some of the houses and had to flee into the street, where Price was fatally shot by a German sniper. Price died at 10:58 a.m., a mere 2 minutes before the ceasefire. It's a sad and undeniably unlucky way to go, but it's nothing compared to the sheer horror of what we've got on the roster next. Number 9. An anonymous Colombian man, a disgusting medical marvel. Before we tell you about this one, we're begging you, please stop eating. Seriously, don't do it. Put down the sandwich. You're not going to want to eat it after you hear this. It is genuinely revolting. Have you put it down? Okay, good. Time for a nightmare. In Colombia, early 2013, a man was admitted to a hospital with a series of unpleasant symptoms: fever, fatigue, weight loss, and a persistent cough. They ran a battery of tests on the man and came upon a horrifying discovery. His body was riddled with various tumors, but something about those tumors wasn't right. For starters, each one seemed too small, and they were clumping together in ways that human tumors just didn't. Months of testing took place after that, trying to figure it all out, until eventually a DNA test yielded an answer. Genetically, these tumors seemed to belong to a dwarf tapeworm. The man's health had declined significantly over the course of the tests, and he died of kidney failure 3 days after the diagnosis had been made. The scientists were baffled. Tapeworms don't typically cause cancer, so how could this have happened? Further tests were taken and answers were found, but they're the kind of answers you probably want to unhear. The unidentified man had been suffering from HIV and had neglected to take his medication, resulting in a cripplingly low immune system. This had essentially allowed a cancer that was afflicting the tapeworm to transfer into the tapeworm's host and proliferate, giving this unfortunate man the only known case of tapeworm cancer. The unluckiest kind of medical miracle imaginable. Anyway, that one was maybe a little too horrifying. How about we take a breather and go back to the ancient world of a particularly strange piece of legendary bad luck instead. Number 8. Aeschylus, the father of tragedy's real-life tragedy. If you enjoy modern novels, plays, movies, and TV shows, then you probably have Aeschylus to thank. He was a playwright and a tragedian, so acclaimed and prolific that they call him the father of tragedy. And if the writings of Pliny hold any truth, he also had a major superstitious streak. At some point in his life, an oracle had told him that he would die when a house collapsed on him, inspiring a lifelong fear that this exact scenario would play out. As a result, he became an avid outdoorsman, trying to spend as much time out of buildings as possible, which probably resulted in him getting a very healthy tan and hastening the actual alleged reason for his death. According to Pliny's writing, an eagle near where Aeschylus was hanging out found itself a tasty snack, a turtle. In order to penetrate the tough shells of turtles, eagles would drop them down onto rocks, smashing open their shells to access the soft meat inside. This eagle in question just so happened to mistake Aeschylus' shiny bald head for a rock and dropped the turtle down onto it. For all the stock he'd placed in the deadly prophecy of the collapsing house, Aeschylus got his skull flattened outdoors by a turtle's house. Bummer. Aeschylus' bad luck might have manifested in a pure force of nature, but the bad luck for our next contestant came from something far closer to home: her boss. Number 7. Debbie Stevens. Proof that no good deed goes unpunished. Under the religious concept of karma, to radically simplify it, you receive the kind of energy you put out. Good deeds are rewarded by the forces of the cosmos, and bad deeds are punished. Unless you're Debbie Stevens, a divorced mother working at the Atlantic Automotive Group who decided to do an incredibly good deed on behalf of her boss, Jackie Bruscia. Jackie was seriously unwell and required a kidney transplant. In order to help Jackie move further up the list and find her a perfect match, Debbie donated a kidney to her boss, possibly even saving her life. However, it takes the body some time to adjust to only having one kidney, so Debbie needed to take a period of medical leave. Jackie didn't respond well to that, urging Debbie to come back as soon as possible. When Debbie came back, she found that she lost all her overtime hours, and she was demoted to a different building 50 miles away from her home. Naturally, Debbie spoke to her lawyers and sought legal recourse, only for Jackie to fire her in response. Debbie's attempting to sue on the grounds of discrimination and wrongful termination, but no matter the potential payout, nothing would ever dull the sting of making such a sacrifice and having the person you sacrificed for spit in your face. Of the whole incident, Debbie said, "I decided to become a kidney donor to my boss, and she took my heart." As blood-boiling unfortunate as this story is, at least Debbie can live another day to continue seeking justice for her case. Sometimes misfortune can follow you even in death, where you've got no way of arguing your own case. Number 6. Sunil Tripathi, disrespected in death. On April 15, 2013, a horrific act of domestic terrorism rocked the city of Boston, the Boston Marathon bombing, where a homemade explosive detonated, killing several and wounding hundreds. In the chaos that followed, law enforcement scrambled to both contain the disaster and hunt down the criminals responsible. But sadly, the professionals weren't the only ones looking into the crime. A vast contingent of Reddit armchair detectives on the new subreddit r/FindBostonBombers was on the case. In case its inclusion in this video wasn't enough of a clue, this situation was not going to end well for anyone involved. Thousands of people joined the subreddit attempting to crowdsource information and find potential leads on the bombers. When the FBI released suspect photos, a new theory on who the perpetrator was started to congeal. A 22-year-old who had mysteriously disappeared a month before, by the name of Sunil Tripathi. His name and photograph were plastered all over the subreddit, as support for the theory of him being one of the bombers grew, even among his own classmates. The theory broke Reddit containment, and Sunil Tripathi was associated with this horrific crime all across the internet. Could he have been the true mastermind behind the Boston Marathon bombing? No, because there was one problem with this grand unifying theory. Sunil Tripathi had died almost a month before the bombings took place. He drowned on March 16th and his body was discovered on April 23rd. The real Boston bombers, brothers Dzhokhar and Tamerlan Tsarnaev, would later be charged with the crimes. But in that time, poor unlucky Sunil had his memory defaced by several thousand overeager Reddit detectives who turned a serious investigation into a circus and painted a completely innocent and very troubled young man as a terrorist. And in perhaps the most uncomfortable segue of all time, speaking of terrorists, number 5, Jason and Jenny Cairns Lawrence, the couple that really needs to get a new travel agent. If ever these two are vacationing in your city, statistically, it's probably a good idea to get out of town for a few days. Why? Because for reasons unknown beyond sheer bad luck, Jason and Jenny Cairns Lawrence have an uncanny knack for traveling to places where major terrorist attacks are about to happen. First, they were vacationing in New York City. The 9/11 terrorist attacks happened, killing 3,000 people and throwing the city into chaos. It certainly made for a memorable vacation, but not in a good way. A few years later, 2005, the couple hailing from the English West Midlands decided to have a getaway to London, only for them to get caught in the middle of a bombing incident in the London Underground that killed 52 people. Figuring that perhaps going on vacation to English-speaking cities was the common denominator here, they took a trip to beautiful, sunny Mumbai in 2008, only to get caught in the middle of a string of terror attacks from the militant Lashkar-e-Taiba group, killing almost 200 people. It's safe to say that Jason and Jenny might just be a jinx. Jenny said of the whole experience, "It's a strange coincidence. The terror attacks just happened when we were in the cities. I shouldn't be laughing about it, but it's a strange coincidence. Maybe we'll think about putting it all down on paper someday, but neither of us is a good enough writer. It's terrible luck when it feels like bloodshed flows around you on vacation, but it's just a whole different kind of hell to have that bloodshed on a far, far grander scale hit you at home, just like our next entry on the list." Number 4. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the man with atomic bad luck. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the testing grounds for the first atomic weapons, each showing such catastrophic effects on its victims that these weapons have thankfully not been used in combat since. Any who experienced and survived these incidents were scarred forever. But few survivors had greater scars than Tsutomu Yamaguchi. one of the few people who saw both blasts firsthand. At the time of the first atomic blast in Hiroshima, Yamaguchi was 29 years old and preparing to leave after a 3-month business trip. He was eager to go home to his wife and infant child when the blast went off, carrying Yamaguchi off the ground with its sheer force and spinning him through the air, knocking him out. When he woke up to hell on earth, the air choked with dust and dirt, tens of thousands dead. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. After spending the night in a shelter, he took one of the trains that was still operating, desperately trying to get back home, to Nagasaki. When he reached the city, he tried to rest and recover, not knowing what was coming. A second blast rocked Japan, almost wiping the city off the map and reinforcing what was already lifelong trauma. The one thing that can be called lucky about Yamaguchi's experience is that he wasn't delivered a horrifically painful death, courtesy of all that radiation. Naturally, Yamaguchi would go on to campaign against nuclear weapons as one of the only people to experience 2 of them. For some people, 2 can be an extremely unlucky number, and that's definitely true of the next person on our countdown. Number 3. Ramon Artagaveitia, the enemy of ships. If you thought our tale of citywide destruction and the horrible trauma it left on one unlucky man is depressing, don't worry. This next one is a different kind of depressing to the last one. We love variety here at the Infographics Show. Ramon Artagaveitia was a Uruguayan man from a family with a long tradition of seafaring. They were ocean people, so much so that as a rite of passage, Ramon's grandfather got him an oar as a gift, with a special inscription on it reading, "Knowing how to use it, you will never be hungry. Your ancestors have always survived thanks to the sea. This is your destiny. Follow it." And Ramon did follow it onto a ship known as America. And no, that isn't some weird metaphor. We really mean the ship was literally called America. However, what Ramon thought would be a pleasant seafaring journey turned out to be a deadly nightmare, as the America caught fire, killing many of its passengers. He only survived because he was able to jump out of the ship in time to swim to safety. Understandably, Ramon was kind of traumatized by the event. He suffered from terrible nightmares and restless sleep for some time after, and it took him a long time to conquer his fear enough to return to the sea, booking himself a ticket to a cruise. He wrote a letter about it to his cousin Enrique, saying, "At last I will be able to travel, and above all, I will be able to sleep calmly. The sinking of the America was terrible. Nightmares keep tormenting me. Even on the most quiet trips, I wake up in the middle of the night with terrible nightmares and always hearing the same fateful word, fire, fire, fire. I've even gotten to the point where I find myself standing on the deck with my life belt on." But Ramon had so much more faith in this new state-of-the-art ship, particularly the fact that it utilized a brand new wireless telegraph system. He wrote in his letter, "You can't imagine, Enrique, the security the telegraph gives. When the America sank right in front of Montevideo, nobody answered the lights asking for help. The ones that saw us from the ship Villa del Salto did not answer our light signals. Now with a telephone on board, that won't happen again. We can communicate instantly with the whole world." The tragedy is that the new ship Ramon had booked tickets on was the Titanic, and he would not be counted among the survivors. Though in a small and bitter consolation, at least his body was found so he could be given a proper burial. Ramon is a man whose legacy is defined by one near miss leading to tragic death. How about someone who seems to have more brushes with death than he does fingers? Number 2. Calamity John Line, a disaster magnet. John Line, also known as Calamity John, has been labeled by multiple tabloids as the unluckiest man in Great Britain. How do you earn such a title, you ask? By being involved in, but to his credit narrowly surviving, 16 major accidents over the course of his life. Most of us consider ourselves pretty unlucky if we have to suffer 1 or 2 major accidents in our lifetime. But let's take a look at what epic fails Calamity John's experienced in his time blundering through life. Well, let's see. At almost 60, he first made headlines for somehow falling into a manhole, like some kind of live-action Looney Tunes character. The tumble damaged his back, his knees, and his left leg. And just in case you think we're being glib about all this, you should know that John himself shares the same attitude. When asked about it by the British publication Metro, he responded in an aggressively British fashion by saying, "Everyone thinks it's just hilarious. My mates, family, and wife Susan just laugh about it. And I don't think there's any reason or explanation. Things could have been much worse and I could have died, but it doesn't worry me too much." It probably doesn't worry him that much because he's used to it by now. His accident record is somehow horrifying and really, really funny. As a kid, he fell off a horse in a cart, and he was then run over by a delivery van. Later in his teenage years, he broke his arm after falling out of a tree. He spent some time in the hospital recovering, then took the bus home on Friday the 13th. Naturally, the bus crashed and broke that same arm again in a different place. At this point, it seems John is held together by tape and a glue stick. But he still embodies the classic keep calm and carry on mentality, saying, "I have a lot of lucky escapes and people have compared me with a cat with 9 lives. It doesn't get me down, it's just how it is." Calamity John may be so unlucky that he got an amusing nickname out of the whole ordeal, but at least he won't go down in history as a man who had one of the most embarrassingly unlucky deaths of all time. That honor could only go to one man. Number 1. Earl Sigurd the Mighty, the warrior who got killed by a dead enemy. You may remember this charming fellow from our opening story. Real name, Sigurd Eysteinsson. This Viking conqueror laid claim to being the second Earl of Orkney after his armies played a pivotal role in laying siege to Scotland. Though he wasn't just content with the plot of land he was initially given. Being the conquering sort, Sigurd decided to expand his domain all over Scotland and made himself a respectable number of enemies in the process. But what's a Viking ruler without a few enemies, you know? Well, one of those enemies was the aforementioned Malbrigta Tusk, so nicknamed because of his famously big front teeth. He also had a way less cool nickname, Malbrigta the Buck-Toothed. So we'll stick with Tusk so the man can keep his dignity. Tusk was a local ruler that Sigurd wished to challenge. He laid out the terms. They would come to the battlefield with 40 warriors each and make it a fair challenge of strength. But in addition to being Sigurd the Mighty, you could have also called the second Earl of Orkney Sigurd the Liar, because he turned up with 80 men to Tusk's 40 and absolutely smoked them. Tusk was beheaded and Sigurd was preparing to call it a day, hanging Tusk's head off of his saddle. But this is when Sigurd's lies and duplicity came back to bite him, literally. As the old Viking sagas tell it, as Sigurd was riding away, Tusk's legendary chomper stabbed into his leg. You can probably imagine what dental hygiene was like in the year 892, so that wound quickly became infected and then turned septic. Sigurd died a far more painful death than the foe he decapitated not long before. Maybe things would have turned out differently if Sigurd hadn't cheated, or if he wore better pants. But in either case, he just wasn't that lucky. Just remember, no matter how bad you think your day is going, at least you're not one of these people. Now check out lucky ways people survived certain death, or watch this video instead.